Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Tina Rubin, and I'm the co-president of Alliance for Women in Media, the SoCal chapter. AWM SoCal is the organization that is sponsoring today's panel. We have been around since 1952, which I think says a lot about the organization, but our main focus is on the advancement of women in media. So most important, we are made up of a fantastic group of men and women in the Los Angeles area that is prime focus is on the advancement of women and supporting them as a resource. We also have a separate foundation that raises money every year, and we provide scholarships to students who are focused in the field of media. You can find us online at awmsocal.org. And why you might be interested in this fantastic organization, I'm going to pass over to our VP of Programming, Lauren.
Hi everybody, I'm Lauren Bond. I am the VP of Programming for this year for our chapter. And I just want to give you a couple of tidbits of information about upcoming events and a few other things that we really love to do as an organization. We are actually hosting a membership meeting in 171C right next door at 5:30. And even though that we are focused on some membership needs, looking at treasury reports and that sort of thing, we're asking any of you that are interested in getting involved in our organization or want to check us out, please to just come on by to that meeting. We want to take some information from you, get you plugged in, and then offer you the opportunity to become a member. If you're part of another organization in town that likes to partner with other women's organizations or other media organizations, we'd love to know about that as well and be able to connect the two groups. We're always looking for opportunities to do panels and mixers and other things like that in town with other organizations that have similar viewpoints and want to encourage other groups like that. We also want to plug a little event that we do. It's called Speed Mentoring. It's going to be focused on film specifically. We'll be hosting that in June on the 16th at Radford CBS. It's a 9 to noon, come for brunch, and it's based on speed dating. You sit down for a few minutes with mentors across a room for that entire time. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out our website, or you can come on by to the membership meeting and get some details about that as well. And part of our discussion tonight is actually going to be our next year's board positions. We do have a couple of openings. That'll be something we're going to be talking about. Again, another great opportunity for you guys to get involved if you're interested in having that experience. We want to pull you in and give you some details about that. So those are kind of our upcoming events. It's a great organization. There's lots of men and women across the industry that come and speak at our panels, that are involved in our membership, and we want to extend that invite to you. So I think that is it for us, and we're going to kick it off, and we're going to throw it over to Christine, who's going to be our moderator for the day, and we'll get started. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Lauren and Tina. Great to have you all here in this incredible panel. My name is Christine Lawton. I am a digital and emerging media executive with about 20 plus years of experience in business affairs and home entertainment and emerging platforms, which I came by through working at Disney, DreamWorks, Universal, and Fox. And for the first time in my career, I am a free agent, so I get to say anything I want. So I'm looking forward to this. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, not in the order in which they're sitting, but all of their names are with them. I'm going to speed talk my way through it so that we can devote as much time as possible to getting information from this amazing panel and making sure you guys have a chance to ask questions. So I will start with Wendy Sweetmore. She's a seasoned media executive, producer, and writer with over 25 years of global media and entertainment experience. She's the founder and CEO of Network B, where she produces original, high-quality content and works across all aspects of the creative process in film, TV, and digital. She has also been a senior executive at MGM and Mark Burnett Productions, producing and overseeing TV series, including The Voice, The Apprentice, Shark Tank, and Survivor. She has also worked with Hearst Publications and Disney and is the founder of LENA, the Ladies International Networking Association. So welcome, Wendy. We also have Laverne MacKinnon. She's a television producer and executive / personal coach over her 20-plus year career in entertainment. She's most recently been the executive producer of the Netflix comedy series Girl Boss, based on the New York Times bestseller. And prior to that, she was head of television for Charlize Theron's production company, Denver and Delilah, where she oversaw projects at Amazon, HBO, Showtime, FX, USA, NBC, Lifetime, Bravo, and many others. Laverne is an adjunct lecturer at Northwestern University, and in her coaching practice, she works with clients to master the art of power of transformation. So welcome, Laverne. Katrina Wolff is an Emmy-nominated producer and president of productions at AG Studios. In July 2015, she launched her own division with AG Studios, focusing on the development and production of high-quality English-language film and TV content. Prior to AG, Katrina was president of production at BN Films and SV production and casting for Dimension Films, where she worked on iconic films such as Bad Santa, The Others, Scary Movie, and Sin City. She graduated summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa from Columbia University, where she won the prestigious W. Cabell, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Greek Prize for Excellence in English. Next we have Zadi Diaz all the way at the end. She is head of digital studio at Me Too and has held roles as VP programming and development both at Ipsy and Awesomeness TV. She's also executive producer and editor-in-chief, YouTube Nation, head of content, and has been highlighted by numerous publications, including the New York Times, Forbes, Wired, Ad Age, The Guardian, Wall Street Journal, CBS Evening News, and others. She's also on the board of the Los Angeles chapter of the U.S. National Committee for UN Women. So welcome both Katrina and Zadi. And Eileen Gruba. She is an actor, director, producer, and activist. She has played memorable, edgy characters on Sons of Anarchy, NBC's Game of Silence, Criminal Minds, Bones, HBO's Hung, Cold Case, and The Closer, gaining her a reputation for courageous character work. That courageousness may have come from overcoming severe health and life challenges with an indomitable spirit, and we're hoping to bring that out as we talk today. She's an advocate for children with disabilities, families with genetic cancers, and fights for the inclusion of performers with disabilities in film and television. She's also a lifetime member of the world-renowned Actors Studio. So a hand for all of you. Okay, so with those introductions, I would like to start with a very basic question, which is based on the title of our panel. Women in the Industry, Developing Film, Television, and OTT About Women. A golden age in Hollywood and indie production. So the question is, and I'll start with you, is it really a golden age? Yes, no, disagree?
Yes.
All right. So why?
Everywhere I look, I see opportunity. As a producer, I've recently launched a new company with Kay Cannon, who wrote the Pitch Perfect franchise. She directed Blockers, which came out about 6 weeks ago, and Kay and I did Girl Boss together for Netflix. And the reason why we've started our film and television company is because there's so much demand for content right now, and also content from diverse voices with diverse protagonists. So it's a really rich, exciting time.
Yeah, good. Eileen, what do you think?
I actually think it is finally here. After 26 years in the business and being on all sides of it, I'm actually seeing minds open up, and especially for women, and especially women over 20. I'm starting to see a lot more respect and a lot more openness and willingness to not only hear but open the door and let someone in who has a point of view from being here a long time.
Right.
Yeah, I see more respect, definitely, and open-mindedness towards the storytelling. I also do know a lot of women directors, and my agent happens to represent a lot of female directors, and finally the doors are starting to open.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because this is both on, the in front of the camera and behind the camera perspectives right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. So that's really good. Katrina, would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. It's hard to know whether we're really in a sustained golden age. I know we're in a a real change period, and I've seen a huge transformation in the last year or so. Last year it was harder to get a film financed with a female director, and now everyone's clamoring for it. But whether or not it'll be sustained, right. And in some cases I have found it's a little bit superficial. It's sort of like a tokenism kind of thing. I've even been asked to come on board projects to just sort of be a woman on it, so there is a little. I think it's much more in television, in Laverne's field especially. More in film, it's a little slower. And I think if you look at the films that, let's say, were in the major festivals last year, it's still a pretty dismal percentage of films actually directed by women. But yeah, right now it does seem almost like the tide has turned. Whether it's a sustained phenomenon, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and that sustainability, I think, is really critical for us to say and for you to hear, and for that to really become, an issue, because it's easy to say with a lot of things that have happened over the last 18 months or so, that, okay, yeah, great, but we are here. We are all here. We're right here, and we're not going anywhere. Right. So, Wendy, would you add to that?
I think we may feel it, but I think the numbers always speak for themselves. And, working, with the Gina Davis Foundation on Gender, and especially our sponsor tonight, in 2014, we all know there were around 25% of women in lead roles, and we've got that up to 2-to-1 now. So, we can see that going up, right. But unless we're 1-to-1, we still got a lot of work to do.
Right, right. Zani, what do you see?
I would say that I would hope so. I think with the advent of the internet, there's a lot more opportunity for people to be called out, and I think that's helped a lot. I've seen even with programs in Me Too, we have like an accelerator program where we get interns in, and we were so proud that the 5 interns that we accepted, they were vetted by 3 different groups, and they were all female, and that was really encouraging. But I do think that it's really up to us and everybody in this room that have gotten to the places that we have gotten to make sure that we are bringing other young people in, right. And that we're really self-aware, but also aware of the opportunities that we can give. Sometimes in our day-to-day, we get so caught up in what we have to do that we kind of try to hurry things up without really kind of being thoughtful. I'm speaking for myself, even just knowing that the many things that you have to do in production. So. I do definitely take time in the day to...
So we've touched on this, golden age for the programming, for the content. Another aspect of that is a golden age in getting the work or in being in the workplace. And I think there are differences there. And so whoever would like to chime in on that, do you think it's a golden age in the workplace and in getting the work? Sadi, you've got the biggest smile on your face. You start.
I don't know why. Getting the work or being in the work. Being in the work, I've always been pretty confident in my abilities. So it's kind of, I think part of it is just standing in that, knowing that you are as good as anyone else in the room, or you don't know as much as anyone else in the room. Right. And that you're there to learn, and if you have a question, you speak up, and there's nothing wrong with asking questions, and being confident in that sometimes when you don't know the answer, that it's okay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people who don't know the answers are probably the most vocal and get the furthest. So when you knowing that you know the things you do, and sometimes I see that even in boardrooms or in meetings that we have, pitch meetings. Sometimes the quietest people have the most powerful ideas. So it's encouraging those more quiet, intelligent, thoughtful, creative voices to come through, so mm-hmm. that in the next meeting they're more empowered to do so. So to your question, I think that, again, we're getting there. I see it coming, but we're not fully there.
Right, right. Yeah, I think definitely the gender diversity and general diversity of any room is going to create an environment that either brings people out or shuts them down. And so certainly within my career, there have been a lot of rooms I've walked into where I'm the only one. I'm the only one who looks like me. I'm the only one of my gender. And it would be good to see that, these workplace environments are changing. And I can say for most of my career in home entertainment, I don't think it has changed a lot. Especially I think at the higher seniority positions. So, but in the workplace, what are you thinking about Golden Age?
I was just going to add on to that in terms of, I feel like I see it like when I meet with studios or with buyers, where I'm seeing lower and mid-level executives really representing, all of the people in this room and, different phases and diversities and points of view. But at the senior management level,
right.
it is, and it is not about, ability or experience or whatever, but it is all white men.
Right.
The Hollywood Reporter came out with a piece a couple days ago just interviewing the TV studio chiefs about pilot season, and then there was a picture, and it was so telling because I think it was, I can't remember, either 8 or 9 studio chiefs, and it was 8 white men and then one woman, one black woman. And it was like, oh my gosh, if that doesn't give us,
Yeah. So it might not be a golden age yet.
But I do feel like it is, everything's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I find that as well. Because I observed the other day there's a rather prominent and growing company in film and television that I noticed they added a couple more partners, all of the partners are white men. They have some people working with them that are, diverse, but it's sort of like a little bit of a fraternity. These guys know each other probably since they were assistants together, probably at one of the big agencies, and they go to each other first.
Right.
And that's a lot. That's a phenomenon that often is a little easier for men, for whatever reason, to kind of.
Yeah.
They get together, they make big ideas, big plans, and they start a company together. And there's not as much yet of that happening that includes women and minorities. There's more of it now, but. Yeah. It's still a phenomenon, you see.
So were you going to say something, Eileen?
Well, I think it's a matter of what's beautiful this year and last is that women are coming together and they're taking their power back from the, 1/10% of the decision makers in the industry who are just the guys at the very, very top. And that's not to discount men everywhere. It's just those decision makers are able to keep control of this industry as long as they're sitting there at the top. And what's happening now is that women are finally coming together, I believe, and organizing in a way that takes the power back. And when 1 or 2 of them squeak through and have a huge success because they fought for what they believed in and they made a big feature or they made a successful TV show, that's when our numbers matter. But until and unless we all continue doing that in a way that, listen, we've left out so much content by keeping the restraints at the top of the industry the way we have. We've left out so many stories and so many critical stories and so many powerful women who have incredible stories aren't even getting a shot, but now they are because the women are collectively banding together, and we have to continue to do that. And not just the women, but everyone who's not at the very pinnacle of the industry.
Right, great. Right. I want to change direction a little bit and talk about the content. And again, this is content about women, made by women, women's stories, and an additional overlay, I think, of general diversity is what we're talking about. Getting women into that top 1/10 of 1%. That would be diversity, right? Female multidimensionality and female likability. So, from the beginning of time in storytelling, you could have lots of unlikable characters that you rooted for, whether it was in the Bible and the story of Cain and Abel, right? You kind of rooted for both of those brothers. Or going through the Phantom of the Opera, that was kind of a despicable character, but it was a love story, and you have an interest in his being, you're rooting for him, all the way up through film noir and the anti-heroes. But we found, I think until very recently, that there was a very kind of single dimensionality to women's characters, and it's harder for audiences to root for a flawed female character. And so I wanted to start with you, Laverne, specifically with regard to Girl Boss, because you had a character that was not likable. And one of your partners in an interview had said, we've got this character who's not likable, but Netflix is 100% behind this character, right? So just from there, and I want all of you to pitch in for this wherever you want, how do you see that changing? Both from a perspective of content, and then if you want to weave into the story some of the professional, workplace stuff, please do. But
I think the bird's eye perspective for my producing partner Kay Cannon and I, when we look back at the Girl Boss series, is that the mistake that we made with that character was that we didn't make her accessible. So while I think that in some ways it was okay that she was unlikable, we didn't find an access point for her. I think it's still incredibly difficult to have female protagonists who can show all of their colors. I think that there's still an incredible bias, and I still face this in the marketplace, when there's a female character who is angry, frustrated, disappointed, and she's supposed to be our lead. My experience has been that it's okay as long as she's a supporting character or a guest character, and then she typically has the role of the slut, the whore, whatever. It's like those characters are reserved for a certain type of woman.
Yeah.
So I think that's
less
still
likable and still single dimensionality.
Yeah. So it's and it's something that we just have to keep championing, and it's hard. It's an uphill battle. It really it's a bias that I experience, not just in terms of characters on the screen, but also behind the scenes as well. Is as a former executive at CBS and Epix, and now as a producer, it's like, how am I likable? How am I accessible?
Right. Eileen.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. First of all, I think from the point of view of having worked in casting for 20 years while I paid my bills as an actor, I think it's a mistake to try to cast into the prior model, which was what those guys thought was perfect. Okay, so it's really hard for me as a woman watching TV or film to believe that a 25-year-old pencil-thin girl in 5-inch spikes is your lead detective on a case who's going to chase down the bad guy. It's really hard for me to think that a woman whose thighs are the size of my forearm is going to beat up men. Her makeup's perfect in her lovely gown as she goes into surgery. We have to think about these things. I know a lot of amazing women in real life. I have a heart doctor who's freaking phenomenal. And yes, she is beautiful. And she's over 50. And she's black. And I find her absolutely fascinating. Now, why are we not casting that way? So when I look at the big picture, I think if you want a woman to be as fierce, I play fierce characters all the time, and mostly people are rooting for those characters because they believe me. I've had a hell of a life. Right. When I'm fighting, you better bet you're going to fight with me, because I'm not going to be crying over lipstick or broken nails. I mean, we need to really look at the reality of what kind of grit the character needs, and then find an actor with that grit and that believability, because, correct me if I'm wrong, women are still driving the box office because it is a woman in most relationships who's going to decide what we're going to go see at the movies tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if you want women to get behind this stuff, you've got to give them women they can believe in. So we have to really look at casting and stop thinking 20-year-old and flawless. I want to see wrinkles. I want to see faces that move. I'm fascinated by the few women who will get up at the awards and their face moves. I'm like, yes, thank you. Why can't women be over 40 and look like a normal over 40 woman? Who do you know really that's over 40 is still the same weight they were when they were 15? Now we need to look at this. And when a woman who has 5 kids at home, or 4 or 3, goes off to do surgery that day, Is she wearing tennis shoes or is she wearing something comfortable? I mean, really, like as women creators, we need to be honest and stop worrying about what those guys want to see and worry about what we want to see. And then you're going to have women your audiences can get behind. I actually had a producer once say to me, do you know why we cast you and then why we brought you back? Because they brought me back on a huge show that there was no room to bring back this character. And I really didn't know why they brought me back.
I'm afraid for the
and
answer.
He said, you are one of the few women in this town who's not afraid to be ugly.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm not afraid to be ugly. Life
Yeah.
can get ugly. It gets
Yeah.
ugly. And we don't always, you know,
Yeah.
we don't always have to put that forward. So I feel like it would be a huge service to the entire human race if we would just drop this illusion of perfection that we've been perpetuating since movies began and get real. And once we get real, people are going to root for us, even if we're female,
Yeah.
on the screen, and all of our imperfections.
That's great. Very good.
I think it's interesting you bring that up because I don't know if you read last week, Peter Bart had a column in Deadline Hollywood that said, "Why are all the roles for women downbeat?" It was talking about, oh yay, there's the Me Too movement, but now why is Amy Schumer complaining so much? Why is Melissa McCarthy, she used to be fierce, now she's playing the, it was basically saying, why aren't you just smiling? Why aren't you more upbeat? And it was, incredibly insulting. It's sort of like one step forward, two steps back. Right. So it was, I would check that out. I mean, he's, in his mid-80s, he's from a different era, but what I have noticed, though, I mean, I still think in TV there is more room for flawed women, like Fleabag on Amazon, or even Girls, Lena Dunham. Those in film, it's a lot slower. Female characters are held to a higher standard of likability. I mean, if you look at men, there's lots of male leads that are actually sort of like sociopathic or lovable rogues, but you don't have that ever almost in women. I have started to see a little trend towards showing more female anger, on screen, like Frances McDormand's character in 3 Billboards. I mean, it's a great example, an outlier still, but like the kind of trend sort of embodying what you were saying. I'm starting to see that express itself more in features, but, again, you take a step forward and then there's a little bit of a backlash sometimes when you really show somebody, warts and all, who is maybe purely bitter and doesn't wear makeup and doesn't care, you'll get those criticisms. So you kind of just have to keep pushing for those roles, I think.
So Wendy, we talked a little bit about multidimensionality as it plays out in kind of professional life. Can you add to that as well as anything else you want to add to?
Obviously, I'm not from here, and I've lived in a few different countries, which is probably why you're asking me. But is it the same in other countries than it is here?
Yeah.
Actually, it's a bit easier here, believe it or not.
That's good to know.
It depends what country that you're in. I've had worked in Europe. I've worked in Australia. I've worked in New York, and the coasts are different too. But what is very, very common is that, whether it's scripted or unscripted, women need a few more layers in their storylines, and that's not to say anything bad about my husband, but he can only really concentrate on one thing at a time. He really cannot multitask, and God bless him, he's very good at focusing. And so, for example, when you're doing something with unscripted, how-tos really work really, really well with men, and if you're trying to cook something. But when you're trying to get a point across, and let's say it is a very an emotional point, entertainment and comedy is one of the best ways to do it. And you're doing it on one level, but really you're getting those, I call it the veggies in between, the meats. You're really trying to get your message through. Otherwise, when you're trying to say something earnest, you're going to get put down straight away in the entertainment. It's going to be very hard for you to sell that. So if you're doing something, you may be under a ruse of a fun character, but there's definitely layers, that are happening there. I just was recently at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I got this amazing book, and on the front, just in big headlines, it just said, "June Cleaver is dead." And I was like, wow, they're really putting it out there that the stereotypes, are really, really changing. And the wonderful thing is, I just read in one of the reports just a couple of weeks ago was that women now, 86%, will either turn off the television if they see a very stereotypical woman. So either don't go to the box office, turn off that television, and let them know that, we want more out of our characters.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so speaking of more, there are universal themes. There's a universality of storytelling, and so no gender or race has a monopoly on sadness, love, humor, disappointment, whatever it is. These are the stories that move us, that make us laugh, that really connect with us. So I was hoping that you could touch on the importance of having these universal themes be told by women storytellers and diverse storytellers. So why is it so important? And I can speak for myself. It's great when I see someone who looks like me. There's a realness and an enjoyment and a fulfillment I take from that storytelling. But why do each of you believe that it is so important?
I'll give you one quick example. There was a piece I was working on at the Actors Studio, a very well-known piece that's about a mother who's lost a child. And she's having a bit of an argument with her mother, who's also lost a child. And there's a note from the playwright that this should be done without emotion.
Wow.
He was not a mother. And I talked with Martin Landau when I was working on it, and I said, regardless of what the playwright says about this, I just don't believe there's a female who loses a child who's going to sit in a room with her mother and have a fight about this pain and not have emotion. So that's why I think it's important for women. That play needs to be directed by a woman, so that you remove the rules or the parameters. I find that a lot of men, I have 6 brothers, I can speak from growing up in a house of 7 men, a lot of men don't like women's emotions. Too bad. We don't have the same pent-up rage because we express our emotions. So we all have to look at everybody's gifts and their ups and downs, and women do express themselves, and therefore, a lot of times, yes, women will be more emotional, but then they let that out and they're moving on. Right. I think it's a very important part of our storytelling to get women's perspectives.
Yeah. There's a realness that comes out in that translates to you wanting to go pay money to go see it. So that's
it's
another
not
reason.
Dissimilar to wanting to have, forgive me, but a woman gynecologist. I'm like, you know what? I feel like she's going to know what I'm going through. So, I don't want to write or direct some male sports movie because even if I've been in that world with all my brothers, I'm not going to have the same perspective as a guy who's been on the football field getting his butt kicked. So maybe that guy should write that and direct that. Yeah. But when it comes to women and women's challenges and women's cancers and some of the female things we go through, I think we need some women speaking up.
And I think in terms of storytelling on any level, in any medium, one of the premises I always talk about with writers, especially, when someone is trying to write a character or write a story and try to be all things to all people, it's nothing to anybody. The more authentic and detailed the world that you portray, however it is, with every detail, if every detail is authentic, it becomes more universal and people believe it in their gut. When you try to just make everything, and those stories about women and from more diverse standpoints obviously are more easily told by somebody who's actually from that background, and I think that's the way into a good story, is the more detail. I mean, if you look at great documentaries, they lead you into worlds, it's a subculture that you may not have ever known, but the more in depth, the more universal they are.
Right.
Yeah, there's this issue of accessibility. Again, it comes up that, if we can't be what we can't see, we also can't feel what we don't know. We need more women in the writers' room. We need girls out there feeling like they can be in that room.
Right.
If you're ever in a writer's room, please implore, everyone around you to invite, even if they're not a writer, just pull in a woman who's in the office somewhere just to kind of like listen. They may have a great idea that you may have not been thinking about. I was watching this video earlier today, and it's not a woman, but it was a video of a black man who started out the video saying, "Before you call the cops."
Yeah.
So before you call the cops,
Yep.
I screamed at my alarm clock this morning. I hate bananas. My brothers, 2 of them are white, 2 of them are black. You get to know this man. So at the end of the video, he's like, "Before you call the cops, I just thought you should know me."
Right.
I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. Just
Right.
being able to know a person, then you feel like you understand their story, and then you understand that they're not so different, right?
Right.
And so getting to that place is where we need to be. So the smallest step that we can take, we can all take once, do something.
So aside from pulling that woman out of the hallway into the writer's
Pull the
room,
woman out of the hallway.
So what are some things that we can do, or that you've seen done, that encourage that inclusion in that creative process? Are you seeing things in particular that you think are great?
I mean, even at work, my boss, so Beatriz Acevedo, she's the president, she invited 3 of us to the next board meeting. Didn't have to. There are no men at the board meeting except for her. She said, "You know what? I'm going to pull 3 of you in, present whatever you're working on. At least they'll get to see your face and what you do."
Right.
Very simple. One day it'll be an hour, but it changes everything.
Yeah.
So just acts like that on a
That's a great
consistent basis,
example.
it adds up.
Yeah. Any others?
I just think men act different when there's more women in a room. They just do. So, and let me tell you, we need men to get us there, because they are, heading the boardrooms, and they are the ones that are going to give us the jobs. And I think they want us there. We just have to work in a different way. But I think the more women in the room, the more we'll keep everyone honest.
Right. Yeah. And they are our partners, and they are our partners in life, and yeah. An interesting aside, a person I worked for said to me, sometimes he gets tickets to a sporting event, a Dodgers game or a basketball game, and he said, sometimes I'll invite some of the more junior guys to go accompany me to these things, and it gives us time together. And then he said, but I noticed that I don't ask the more junior girls, the women, if they would want to go. And he said to me, do you think they'd feel weird if I ask them? I said, they feel weird because you don't ask them, because they're not getting any face time with you. They know that their peers are getting time with you, but they're not. And if anyone is uncomfortable in this situation, then you're going to have to address why that was. But to not do it at all is one of the things that's keeping them out of these situations. They're not being seen, they're not being heard, nobody knows what they do. And I've heard, saying it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know. And so, it's you have to get together in a room. And so, if anyone has any particular examples of how we can increase that pulling in of, I think generations and genders and putting them together to get those stories would be great. I don't know if...
It just feels like we just have to step back and take a common sense approach to our industry. Regardless of the subject of a movie, there is going to be someone who has perspective on it that isn't the same as everyone else. So find that someone. And who cares if they're male or female or what color they are or religion or sex? None of that matters. Who has a close perspective on this story and who's been there in the real world? And then hear them. Find them and hear them. And you're going to find out that regardless of what the subject is of any movie, there's going to be a community of people who know that world, and they are going to be diverse. So just bring them in and hear them.
Right. So that's going to take some openness to saying, I don't know this, and letting
exactly.
them in.
And I think it's, for at least my generation, kind of important to get away from this idea of kind of like there's only room for one, I made it this far, and not being generous with lifting up other women and mentoring them, just because I never had a mentor and never had, and that doesn't mean it has to be that way. There's a lot of that mentality still, I think, in the industry. Like, it was this hard for me, so why should it be easier? If we really have to get away from that and have, actively mentor younger women.
I'm going to ask that unpopular question, or, it's like, do you see that happening more with women than with men?
Yes, I do, actually.
Yeah.
I've observed it more. Because, again, there hasn't been as many opportunities, so there's the feeling like more proprietary over your position.
I think we've been conditioned to think that way.
Yeah.
And unconditioning ourselves takes some time, but honestly, to think that there's not enough room at the table when the table is immense, right? Why is there enough room at the table for 1,000 men, but not an extra woman?
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense.
Not two women.
I've actually found that there's two type of women that I've sort of met, and it's not for any fault of anyone, but it's women who get to the top and put the ladder down and say, come on up, and there's the ones that get to the top and say, hey, I'm here, and just pull the ladder up. And I've actually had a few more men mentors pull me up, and I'm really grateful for that. And I've had, some great women, but I will tell you, some of the hardest and toughest experiences I've had in this industry have been with women. Yeah. And it does happen, unfortunately, and I think if we think more of abundance and rather than scarcity, we'll get there quicker.
Yeah, well, I like that. I mean, this part of this is truth telling, and it's not demonizing any gender, but it's like, here's some realities that we're really dealing with, and they have to change. So, because it does translate into money, right? Whether you're going to subscribe, whether you're going to pay a rental fee, a purchase fee, if you get enough of the right voices in the room to connect with enough people, you'll get a whole lot, the pie gets bigger. So, okay. I'm going to shift now to marketplace changes. So, ton of marketplace changes we've seen, in the last 10 years, certainly. Anything from the importance of algorithms determining things like genre and format and casting, to the disappearance of smaller outlets, to the plethora of content. There are a lot of content opportunities, but it's harder to find it. Which of these or other, marketplace changes are you seeing as either kind of critical or interesting to women's stories and content, or interesting or game-changing in a positive way?
I might address it first because I've really felt the brunt of that in the last 6 months. So, I had great intentions of creating a platform and raise the money in a very male-dominated field. And at the end of last year, we saw close to maybe 6 digital media companies close down. And at a growing age, it was tough. You either had to grow, or you had to pivot, or you had to close down. And especially with some of the big ones, which were, NBC, Seesaw, you can see, full screen, watchable. I don't need to keep going, but there's at least 5 or 6 of them. And when you've got big companies like that have $1 million behind them, it's going to be tough to actually start a platform right now. So people have their habits, and one of the big things is obviously with Facebook changing their algorithms was that it's pay or play now. There's no other organic ways that we can get around this. But the great thing is there's still some big platforms that are established now, and they are after content. They cannot make it all. Actually, they're hiring 20-year-olds and 23-year-olds because their budgets are so tight, and they're not getting the quality that they need. And, they're going to need outside producers servicing them, and they're constantly looking for that. So there is a market, to pivot with the industry and go with the growing demands of that industry. But, we're in a very, very interesting time. I call it sort of a pioneer cowboy time, because no one knows what's going to happen. And, we get to shape it a little bit.
Is anyone seeing, did you have something, Zadie?
Similar to that, I think, because of all of the algorithm changes, we find ourselves having to be platform agnostic, and knowing that, it's really harken back to IP, like making sure that the story is strong and it is good. Years ago, and even still now, it's been scale. Create a lot of stuff and make sure you're just pumping stuff out constantly. You burn out. Then you figure you get a lot of creative people who don't feel inspired anymore. And so I think we're at a point now that we really are focused a lot more on concentrating on story and being platform agnostic and really getting in talent, really powerful people creating good stories.
Do you find that these changes change the story? Do they help the story? Do they hinder it?
TBD. I think it helps ultimately. I personally think getting focusing on good stories that change people's lives ultimately, that matter, that stay with you. I think in the end that is what we're all in it for. Right. Also having the ability to have communities and be able to form almost clans and these covens and these places to talk to other women one-on-one and form these kind of coalitions, I think is a lot more powerful than it used to be. So they're also good. There's also a lot of good that's come out of it. Yeah, there are so many niches. I think that's one of the good things. I mean, we've got this great fragmentation, which is hard, because if you want to reach a mass audience, it's difficult. But one of my girlfriends on Facebook posted something. She said she'd found out that there was some affinity group for dog nail grooming, and I thought, wow, that's about as niche as you can get. But there is something about that when you can kind of coalesce a group and you can tell a different story or reach a different audience. It might be smaller, but is that niche audience helping to create stories?
I think in film, it's just interesting what's happening. The film industry is changing so much. Who knows what's going to happen with theatrical? But there's, on the high end, there's, the big tentpole movies, which interestingly, in the last couple of years, there's Black Panther, which also has very multidimensional women, as well as obviously being diverse, breaking the mold, Wonder Woman before that. So there's this shift where suddenly I think everybody wants to sort of have it. Even before that, like Arrival, it did very well, and all of a sudden everyone was looking for female-driven sci-fi. So that's kind of interesting in creating opportunities. And then there's just a lot less in the middle now. There's still an opportunity, I think, the movies that are low budget that have popped out, like Moonlight and Florida Project, and interesting little niche films. I think that's where all the most interesting work is happening, and where people are looking for female-driven story. So it's just all the stuff in the middle is completely doesn't make sense if budget-wise. Like it just doesn't make sense anymore in the marketplace. Yeah, and there might be more opportunity for that in television, which is what we're seeing. Yeah, just it always, maybe it's the grass is greener for me, but I do see that a little bit. Yeah. And you still don't want to discount the power of the internet. I mean, there's still something very powerful about a kid in the Bronx being able to pick up their iPhone and shoot something that you've never seen before. Right. Yeah. So we still have access. Knock on wood, we still have access to tell stories that haven't been told. Yeah. Yeah, that is a marketplace change that has, it's lowered the bar to entry in terms of content creation and distribution. And so, I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon that's been, going on for a while, but I think it has broadened the spectrum of storytelling in a great way. So, okay. So what are some great examples of indie content about women by your competitors? So give us a thought that you like and really stands out. Like, what would you give a shout out to? Laverne.
Oh, I should be prepared with an answer for this, and I don't have one right now.
Okay. Anyone?
It just because my focus is really on television and more premium television. So when I think indie, I think smaller budget. So that's why I'm struggling.
So then we'll switch it up a little bit, and we can still think about that. But so tell me a project you're currently working on that you love.
Oh my gosh, let's see. There are so many. There's a project that my partner and I are developing based on a book by Richard Moraes called Buddhaland Brooklyn. And it's about a Japanese Buddhist priest who is sent to Brooklyn by his superior to help build the first temple in Brooklyn for the local believers. And the reason I love this so much is because it's a Japanese male lead, and you don't see that. It's at the core of it, it's really a romantic comedy because Japanese priests are allowed to be in romantic and sexual relationships. They're allowed to drink and be like a normal human being. Mm-hmm. And I also love it because thematically, I think that we all experience pain and suffering in our lives, and this Buddhist priest has this expectation of himself that he's supposed to be perfect, he's supposed to know things and be zen, and he's not. And he's not able to deliver on that.
It doesn't happen in Brooklyn.
It doesn't. And I love thematically that idea of pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. But I feel so passionate about, and Kay does as well, about championing. This is a big swing. It's going to be really tough to set this up because it's a Japanese lead, and you just don't have that. So.
I like it. Okay. Yeah. Eileen.
Oh gosh. Well, when you first asked about what movies, my brain always goes back 1,000,000 years ago to Steel Magnolias, because that movie came out, God knows what year, but I always think back on that and think that to me was like strong women community coming together to deal with the worst cases in life, right? And I just loved the women in that, and I always wished to see more and more and more. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things I see shifting in the industry, because we've been battling for so many years to get our industry to wake up and include people with real disabilities. And it's a critical part of our community, and there are close to 20% of our population worldwide identify with having some form of disability, and our industry has always thought that meant like a perfect looking person sitting in a wheelchair, and that's just not the real world of disability. There are so many different aspects of it, and what I'm starting to see now, which is wonderful, is that the industry and storytellers are starting to reach out to those of us who they know have had these kind of challenges, because they're trying to get more authentic in their storytelling and their portrayal. And I think that's going to be a really huge gift to our industry, because there's so much story there that has been misrepresented.
Right.
And so I think that's going to open up a lot of avenues. They had great success this year with the Disability Film Challenge, where people are, every year it grows exponentially, and people are starting to see what it looks like when you put a person with a real challenge in a role with a real challenge, and how authentic that is, and how fantastic and engaging. And I think that that's going to be helpful to all women everywhere, because it will break down those walls really fast, this illusion of perfection when we get to reality. One of the projects I'm most excited about that we shot in the fall, and they're still doing reshoots, but it's the most inclusive film I've ever encountered, and it's called The Homecoming, and they have lots of characters, all different characters, men, women, every kind of disability you can imagine, people without disabilities. And the thing is, it was the happiest set I've ever worked on.
Wow.
And nobody had to say, hey, did we hit this community, you didn't have to. You just had to be open to who was the best for the role. Yeah. And I'm excited to see more of that.
Good. All right, Katrina, so shout outs.
I have, so there's so many projects that I love. I love them all, but there is one called Candy. Well, it's basically a biopic about the Warhol superstar Candy Darling, who is one of the first transgender, if not the first transgender movie star. And we have the rights to her material, and we have a great team coming on board, one of the writers from Transparent, as well as one of the producers who's transgender herself, Zachary Drucker, who's amazing. And I just think it's such a great time to tell this story and kind of show people where it all sort of started. So that's one of the many things I'm excited about.
That's great. Wendy.
I'm going to do a shout out because I was lucky enough to be on the jury for the Bentonville Shorts Film Festival, and it just shows women and diversity. And women are 2-to-1 diversity. People of diversity are 3-to-1, and LBT are 1%. So the winner of that was a film, and you should catch it on YouTube. It's called The Brown List, and it was just a very funny short film about a girl that wasn't Afghanistan enough for the role. And she kept doing her eyebrows, and she's like, okay, am I now ethnic enough for you? And how she kept going for different roles. But it just very sweetly showed how strong it is.
Right, great. Sadi?
2 quick projects that I'm really excited about, and maybe some of you can help. First one is called Stories of Us, and because Latinos aren't a monolithic culture, I mean, this spans the gamut and the rainbow, and some of us don't speak Spanish, and some of us do. It spans many generations. We are creating a mini doc series where each episode highlights really powerful, important, interesting, eccentric people who you may not know. So again, getting to know people across the U.S. and what does that actually mean. So if you know of anybody who's really interesting, let us know. And the other one is Me Too Presents. So what we want to do, we've created a program where we're really bringing up young, up-and-coming filmmakers, animators to create shorts. So really giving opportunities to people coming out of college, people, interns, people who are interested in giving them small funds to create their films. So if you know of any really talented filmmakers who are Latino or who are interested in the culture, definitely let me know as well.
Great. Well, before I open it up for questions, I just want to say those are all stories I would love to see. There's a universality in each one of them. You can tell they're being told from a different point of view, and they all sound like things I would connect with. So I love it. Okay, so opening it up for questions. I will take you who had your hand up first with the glasses on your head. I'll take you.
Yes, hey, great panel, thanks. A male feminist, son of a feminist.
Woohoo!
raising a female filmmaker.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
There's an audience. I'm like taking a few arrows as a male on the last 2 female panels, but I get it. But there is actually another audience I would be remiss to say I feel like you have the power to target. That's women who support ego shall remain nameless. There's a lot of women that are unconvinced as to what's going on. And I think it's pretty interesting to hear what I've heard today and, see a lot of powerful women that have the power to actually do. It's not just the studios, it's the other power, right?
Yep.
So anyway.
Yeah, okay.
It's more of a comment than a
Great.
question, but feel free to comment.
Yeah, stories have the power to change our society, politics, all of that.
Yeah, okay. Another question. Yes, in the front.
Okay, so I think we're talking about 2 big things here, and we haven't quite gone deep enough. And the first is culture. It's easy to say these guys that sit at the top are the bad guys, but it's American culture. It's deeply, deeply ingrained, and it's not the same in other countries. I work in Canada. It's not the same here.
So is the question, what would we do to change the culture?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have some ideas.
Okay.
You talked about unlikability. We saw an election last year in which it wasn't just they didn't like the female candidate, they hated her.
Right. Well, what does the panel have to say about that in terms from a cultural perspective?
I'm under a $10 million non-disclosure, so I can't say anything because I worked for the band because I was one of the original producers on The Apprentice. So unfortunately, I have to keep silent.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm going to leave it to the panel.
Go ahead, Eileen.
It's interesting that you say. It's interesting that you say the culture. Again, I'm going to. I get it, but here's my unique perspective. I go out and I speak all over this country to all kinds of groups, all outside of entertainment, all across this country. And one of the things is that I never, ever prepare what I'm going to say in advance because I always come into the room and I listen to what's going on and I find out who my audience is. I listen to them. And then I know exactly what I have to say to help them, encourage them, inspire them, which is usually the reason I'm brought there to speak. Cancer patients, survivors of this, that, and the other thing, women empowering other women, you name it, I've spoken at their events. So what I find really interesting is that the people out there in our world across this country, LA and New York tend to close their ears to that world out there. They're not listening. We need to listen. Because what I find interesting is that this little town I'm in right now and I've been here 20 years, but in the industry 26, and I've lived in New York and Atlanta and Alaska and across this country, Florida. This LA, forgive me, is the most closed-minded town I've ever lived in. It is. We are the problem. So we have to open up and listen to people out there. When it came to encouraging the employment of people with disabilities, it's the population out there that has been the groundswell to force our industry to start waking up. Our industry didn't open up their minds because they wanted to or they were open-minded. Our industry started opening up their minds because the groundswell out there was getting louder and angrier and louder and louder and louder. Now, that tells me that, yes, there is a lot in our culture that has to change, but that LA needs to stop thinking in the past, because LA is thinking in the past, and they're thinking, forgive me, I'm in a totally different arena than these women, and they can speak from a whole different point of view. However, when it comes to the human experience, I think the world out there is more ready than our industry thinks it is. Yeah. We're not giving enough credit to our audiences. And so the same people are still running our industry and making the same decisions based on the same thing that worked in the past. It's why we keep seeing the same faces all the time. We keep seeing the same stories recycled. And it's when we take the risk and have the courage to open up to new ideas, new thoughts, new casting, new people, new women, that's when things are going to change. And when I say new, I don't mean brand new and just out of college either. I get that there's value in all of that, but there are an enormous amount of women in our industry who never had their voice, ever, and they have a ton of wisdom. And they have a ton of stories, they have a ton of ideas, and all we have to do is just open up the floodgates, and we're going to have what we want. We just need to hear all those people who have been in the game and in the trenches for so long and haven't had a chance yet.
It's really true, and the listening is really important. So, it's not just the coasts. You have to listen to the whole, I'm going to take another one. Go ahead, right here in front.
This is a more practical question, because I know there's a lot of creators, female creators. Are any of you actively seeking content? And if so, like what? From genre to true stories, what are you looking for?
Yes, on my side, digital and shorts. Are you actively seeking content was the question, and if so, what? For me too, it's Latino-focused digital content, so it's shorts. We're looking for writers, looking for directors, producers. We're always on the hunt for really talented people who are passionate about Latino culture.
I'll say yes as well. We're looking for, I like to focus on true life stories, people that have been through really phenomenal, life-changing, transformational stories. That could be either a feature or some sort of scripted series.
Yeah, I have so many film projects. We're really trying to also focus more on television. So I'm really looking for material, especially stories, books that are a great IP to potentially adapt into TV, any genre.
Okay. I think I saw a question, yes, in the print shirt. Yep.
I think this is mentioned earlier. A lot of times making it as a woman in this industry feels like a big secret. When was the first moment you felt about attraction in the industry, and what was the breakthrough?
Okay, for those who couldn't hear that, when was the first moment that you felt like you had traction, given how difficult it is to kind of get that traction?
I think it was when I was at CBS and I was working in the children's department, which at the time was Saturday morning, and Nickelodeon dominated, and so it was a dying department, and I had an opportunity to interview to move into current current programming in prime time, and I had to interview with Les Moonves, and I remember going into his office, and he had this very sort of deep couch, and if you sat far back, then your feet were off the ground, and so I was like, I don't really know how to sit. And I remember I just like leaned over and I put my elbows on my knees, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I was like, I'm destined for greatness, and I want to be a part of this. And I was like, I couldn't believe those words were coming out of my mouth, but at the same time, I felt like I had this opportunity. Yeah, and I was like, and he completely, I mean, I got hired for the primetime job, and then, basically I was promoted every, 18 months, every 2 years, and was at CBS for 10 years and headed up drama development there. But it was like, I think it was like seizing the moment was my traction. It wasn't about, it was about me.
You had to realize it was there and then go take it.
And make a stand for myself.
For me, it was interesting because I came into this whole thing as a digital content creator. So in 2006, I was creating videos on the internet, a show called Epic Food, for like 6 years with my husband. And I met a lot of people here in LA, very nascent stages of like the internet and kind of trying to figure this out. So a lot of the people that are now working at Disney and MGM, and there were people who were trying to figure it out at the time. So I just remember that moment as a creator, just like 3 a.m. And then I see this email come through, and it's from somebody who was working at Disney at the time, who was just a friend of mine, and then said, hey, so we're working on a digital doc series, kind of documenting what's going on here at Disney. Do you want to come and do it? Because we don't know anyone else who knows the internet in this way. I'm like, fine, go do it. They kept me there for a while. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm here for like a couple months, and we're shooting this thing. Is this thing actually going to go through? Because we're in these board meetings, and they're kind of fighting it out. I'm like, I don't think this is ever going to go anywhere because how many releases are... Anyway, cut to forward a couple of months, and they asked me to stay on to lead the digital video department. I find myself, leading a team of 40. They added the mobile team. I'm leading a team of 60. And I'm like, how did that happen? But I realized how hard I worked, and you don't give yourself enough credit. So it happens just because you put the work in and you think about the 3 a.m. mornings for 5 years that you've been doing this thing, and you actually know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, so there's that acknowledgement. Yeah, I guess I'd say that to everyone. There's a moment when you have to acknowledge your own credentials, your experience, and then you have to have the guts to kind of, say it out loud and like, oh wow, I am that person, and then you can kind of move into, helping others with that traction that you gained. So I know we're almost out of time, but if there's any other of the panelists,
I was going to say I had a little bit of a different story where actually everyone was fired except for me. Just. Sometimes
you've made it when
I thought it was really hard work, but when you're the youngest person in the room sometimes and you're the lowest paid, you know what? It has its advantages when you're young. I just want to say that.
There you go. Okay. Well, I will refer everybody to deeper bio information on the Digital Hollywood website. You can, get a whole lot more color and richness about these women, and I just want to say thank you very, very much to these wonderful women in Spanish. Thank you.
Does anyone want the chocolates? Does anyone want the I don't want it. Oh yeah, you kidding? It's my favorite. Hi.